girls. Welcome to the final episode of VOX World before Christmas. So Merry Christmas if you are tuning in to this last episode of 2022. I'm joined by Sonia Talati today of GoDaddy, and I'm delighted to welcome you along, Sonia. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, super excited to be the last in the holiday series. It's going to be a
Indeed.
great end of the year. I feel like people are excited for a year that's fully non-pandemic.
I know. I
So
know.
I'm personally looking forward to it.
Nice one. Thank you. And you've dressed for the occasion. You're wearing red, Christmas kind of red.
Yes,
I really should
exactly.
I really should have had my Christmas jumper on. Today's the only day I haven't had my Christmas jumper on for some reason. I don't know why that is. I'm looking down there as if it's down there, but it's not down there. It's next door.
Is it
So
a
there you go.
onesie?
Yeah. No, no, no. It's just a Christmas jumper. It's kind of like snowflakes and Santa Clauses and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Um, but I'm letting the side down today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually in New York this past weekend, and New York is like one of the best places to be during the holidays. I mean, it is holiday
Mm,
come to life. And I found out that like the amount of money that's spent to make all those windows and the street decorations and whatnot is in the high millions, and I was just
mm.
impressed.
It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, like the Macy's windows, so beautiful and so expensive to make. It's like Santa's workshop that it takes.
They start it in about July or something, don't they? I
Oh yeah, and yeah, they do. Yeah, I remember actually as a journalist, I covered it. I went to the workshop where they create everything, and it feels like you're
Wow.
in the North Pole.
Yeah, it's mad. It's crazy. Well, I just missed all of that when I was in New York in October. They
Ah,
were just setting up the ice rink. You could see
hmm
little sprinkles of Christmas. Like we went into Macy's and we went upstairs on the very top floor, kind of out of the way of everything. They had like a Christmas floor, and you could just see a little glimpse of what it would be like. Christmas trees everywhere and stuff like that. And you could see that they were sort of beginning to build up to it. So yeah, next year, hopefully, the Voice Summit next year is in December. I think we're going to do the Voice Summit again next year. So we're
yeah,
going to have another track, another VUX World track at the Voice
nice.
Summit, and so that's in December. So maybe we'll stop off at New York on the way back.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even in the summer, like to give you an idea of how much they spend, Macy's spends like in July during their fireworks, they spend $10 million. The average fireworks for a large show is around 20,000. So you can just imagine
What?
the budgets these companies have. Yeah.
Oh my days, that is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Hopefully, they're spending some of that money on
Yeah.
technology as well, and maybe some
Yeah.
some
Well,
some
mhm.
AI automation technologies. You never know.
Yeah, maybe at some point. It's definitely a good user experience. You know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you began your career then as a journalist. You were a journalist for quite a while. You were
I
also a
was.
TV
Yeah.
anchor, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of kind of communication skills, which would make you a perfect candidate for conversation design. How did your interest in conversation design come about, going from journalism to now this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I feel like my life has been very organic. And interestingly enough, when I started off as a conversation designer, it reminded me of my very first job when I used to write scripts for, the anchor and reporter back and forth. And you're designing that and, putting in the package and where the video goes and whatnot. So in some ways, it was as familiar as what I had started off with. Um,
Interesting.
and, as any good story goes, I actually discovered conversational AI when I was with one of my mentors at a bar in New York City. And he
Nice.
owned a conversational AI company, and I have to really thank him for educating me about, sort of the beginning stages. And this was when every company was a startup and no corporations were doing anything really related to conversational AI. And it was
I think we might have lost Sonia there. I think we've lost Sonia. Hopefully, she'll join us back momentarily. I thought I'd lost the audio. I wasn't quite 100% sure, but it did appear that way. Oh, here she is. We've got Sonia back now.
okay. Can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yes, you're back.
All
We
right. I
lost
hope my
you.
Wi-Fi sticks around, you know. All
We
right.
lost the audio very briefly. So I was doing my very best to lip read. I don't think I quite got the whole thing, but you were saying
Okay.
that it was it was you were in about New York. You met somebody who had a company, an AI company, and it was back when they were all startups and founders, and the big tech or the kind of
Hmm.
like more kind of sophisticated deployments of this stuff weren't really around, and then we kind of lost you.
Oh yeah. So what I decided to do was I started my own company where I was essentially helping preserve their life stories. And I thought, what better way to do it than through conversations? Like imagine hearing the life story of your grandpa through an Alexa machine or something like that, versus going through a book or whatnot. And it was very popular. So after I launched that company, it really lifted my total focus into conversational AI and its use cases. So that was the entry point, and then I kind of moved on to work at different companies on their initiatives related to chatbots, voice, IVR, etc.
Nice. And it was hereafter, wasn't it? That company.
Yes, yeah, it's still around, and actually the Wall Street Journal won its first ever Emmy for a documentary that featured it. So
Really?
that was, yeah, it was all my worlds colliding, and I wouldn't have expected that.
It's crazy, yeah. Because I remember I told you before we had James Vlahos, who was your co-founder,
Hmm. Yeah,
on
yeah,
the show ages ago. I can't remember what year it was, but he'd just written "Talk to Me."
yeah, yeah. It's a book about
Yeah,
the dad bot. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So yeah, it was
that's
literally
cool.
just then. Yeah, it's crazy. So that must have been an interesting period because a lot of the conversational AI applications that you see out there in the world are very constrained. I think the world has woken up to the reality of having domain specific conversational AIs. In like
Yeah.
2016 and 2017, when you had kind of the rise of Alexa and stuff like that, it was sort of like everyone's talking about these high and wide assistants that can help you with absolutely everything. And then
Hmm.
when you try and create something like that, you quickly realize that actually it's very difficult. And so having very domain specific knowledge is a lot easier. And from a company's point of view, makes far more sense. GoDaddy, for example, where you are now, it makes far more sense that all of GoDaddy's
Hmm.
conversations are related to GoDaddy's products and services. And
Right.
so, but what you were doing with Hereafter is it is quite high and wide, isn't it? I wonder if you could explain a little bit about the gist of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we went about it was we used a voice platform to essentially uh, feed into it as an Alexa skill. So we were one of the Alexa skills that exists. And so what Amazon does with Alexa, or has done in the past, is have these different skills that are specific, pages. If you were to think about websites or pages of information, and you wake up that skill with certain words. So in this case, it was a privacy protected, so only you would know, the name of how to wake your grandpa up or whatnot, and there'd be a passcode, and then you can have that conversation. So for us, it really felt like we were using a tool out there that really does everything and is very generalized, but our use case was very specific. And what I found from all of my different experiences, it tends to work best when the use case is specific and really clearly laid out. That crystal clear vision helps the product really achieve what it set out to do, and has intention. And we had that, so that was wonderful. It ended up working out really well. So that's how we did it.
Mm. Yeah, the that visioning part is interesting because it's for a lot of deployments that I've seen in the conversational AI sort of realm, that I used to work in service design. I used to do a lot of digital service design, and the very first thing that you would do once you've done that discovery and you've understood your user needs and the pain points and the current kind of lay of the land as far as the customer
Hmm.
journey and stuff like that, is you would say you bring a whole team together and you say, right, this is what's going on. These are the areas of pain, and this is what the customer needs are that we need to solve. Here's what the problems and the staff are facing, and the technologies that we have. what's the vision for what this can be in future? And it would always start there. What's the vision? What do we want to do to turn this around? And then everything you did after that with your new service design would basically be in line with what the entire organization believes to be the direction that it needs to head in. I don't know what your thoughts are. And, you've obviously worked at a bunch of different companies working with conversational AI. So you've probably experienced probably both of these sides of the coin, which is that in some cases, it seems to me as though conversational AI today is being seen a little bit like a stick and plaster in some cases. Let's just put a chatbot on the website to stop people calling us. Let's put a voice assistant in the IVR in some cases to stop people getting through to an agent, kind of thing. It doesn't really seem as though there's much vision behind it, unless you look at Erica or Eno or some of those kind of higher profile assistants that are
Mhm.
quite clearly taken a completely
Yep.
omni-channel approach where it's
Hmm.
intended to be the front door. Don't always get that with a lot of other companies. I would say that vision is lacking in some senses. I don't know if you concur with that.
I absolutely agree. I think not having a big vision is and a clear use case is a big impediment, and it ends up creating further delays down the line. So if you think about like, when you purchase a skateboard or a recipe book or a set of skis, usually there's intention behind it. Like, I want to exercise more. I want to spend time outdoors. I want to bake something for the holidays. And that intention is really important because it drives what ends up happening and the execution of it and the deliverable. So I found that, because this technology is so new, and finally impermeating different organizations and reaching maybe multiple years of maturity, it's still very nascent, and it's super important to have that carved out before starting this path. And I really feel like that's something where organizations tend to fail at, and it's critical to have experts who are helping to drive that vision and helping to curate that before getting into the work itself.
Yeah, we used to have at the beginning. So once we got the vision, we would start every meeting at the beginning with that vision. Every single slide deck that we ever created had the vision as the first slide, and it was kind of like a constant reminder because everyone who is involved isn't necessarily always involved. I think maybe it's different at GoDaddy. I imagine you've probably got a dedicated team, but for many organizations, it's people who have got, as is the case with many roles, you're wearing about six different hats. Thursday you're working on a
Right.
chat bot, but then Monday morning you're back on content, or you're working in security patches, or you're doing, you know what I mean? It's like it's lots of people do lots of different things. So being able to bring people back on track to say this is the purpose of why we're doing this before we kick off any sort of sprint or whatever it might be is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, King. It's super important to have that and to keep driving it over and over again. So that when that person's coming in to wear that hat, they know what's going on. So at GoDaddy, we have a team that's dedicated to the chatbot. So it helps in terms of where people's focus is. But there's so many areas that we can focus on, and we do a lot with our chatbot. We do everything from, helping a person renew their product to, walking them through a issue they might be facing, or they want to learn to build their website. So that can lead to, so many different intents can come from that. I want to add a blog. I want to add an image. Can you show me how, what's the best kind of video style that I should be incorporating? So it really ranges. And as a result, the asks that we get sometimes really range too, because, you know, people sometimes tend to think there's a magic wand and the chatbot can solve it all. So kind of being able to go back into that, something like what you mentioned, where, this is really our vision, this is what the purpose is, that helps. The other thing I would say is there's multiple sides, right? Just like as writing goes, or, having this podcast goes, it's all about the audience, where there's a communication between what the goals are and that meeting what the audience intentions are. So, there can be a desire to reach a business goal, like, we want to reduce costs to customer support, for example. But if that's not met with the customer desire to gain support through that medium, then we're, the purpose has been lost and in
Mm,
translation. That's the other thing that I think is really, really important, is really thinking about who the user is going to be and does this really work for that person.
mm. And with GoDaddy, it must be quite a challenge because you've got, although the domain is constrained, there's only a certain number of topics really that people are going to talk about. But within those topics, you've got incredible complexity. I think we might have lost Sonia again. I was going to say that GoDaddy has incredible complexity because you are dealing with all kinds of issues that people might come across. Here we go. We're getting Sonia again. Hello.
Hi, I don't know what's
We're
happening.
back. It's all right. It's only momentarily. We can patch it up on the podcast. We can remove the audio. It's fine. What I was
Okay.
going to say is that with GoDaddy, you have although the topic itself is constrained, that within that topic you've got so much complexity because somebody might be having a hosting problem. They might be having a problem with emails that they're using via
Mhm.
GoDaddy. They may be wanting to know something about WordPress, in terms of how do you configure this part of WordPress or whatever. They may have a billing query. What am I going to do? What do I, or they may be having a domain query. Can I sell this domain? Or there's a lot of complexity within that. And I imagine it'd be interesting to understand from your perspective, like what the scope of the assistant is as far as allowing kind of like self-service resolution
Mhm.
versus gathering a bunch of information and handing it off to an agent, because I imagine some of it's quite long tail that you might get. Is that
Yeah,
true?
absolutely. That's 100% true. So our customer facing chatbot is very complex. We intend to answer so many different types of user inquiries. And typically people come in, desiring support and really like want to know how they can fix something, how they can update something, get help for something, learn more about it. So there's a whole slew of variety that's inbuilt for our chatbot to be able to understand. So with great complexity comes great responsibility. Um, so just like with great power comes great responsibility. So we really have to do an amazing job at certain things. We have to do a really good job of being able to have excellent training so that we're actually able to understand the exact ask and not sending the person the wrong way. We have to be able to guide the person sometimes, because oftentimes the typical customer is an entrepreneur. They're not website developers. So sometimes it's helpful to kind of make it easy for them so they don't have to think about their ask, and we can kind of get them to the right place. And really just being on point of tailoring the conversation to the customer. So if we know things about them, what their metadata, what page they're on, who they are, what products they own, might be a little easier to curate the initial conversation based off of that. So there's several tools we use for that. And as far as the part about when we would hand off, some of the issues are low complexity, some are middle, some are high complexity. And high complexity can be, let's say, it's a troubleshooting website issue, and there could be multiple solutions depending on different small bits of data that would be hard to gather over a conversation well. That might be a moment where a person really is valuable. And this was something that I talked about at the Rework Summit in London, which is the power of being able to understand where human beings really have their value is so important as an organization. That's the other piece of the vision that has to be crystal clear, because there are things people can do that a bot cannot do now at all. Like, we just don't have the technology for that. And it's just much better done in the hands of a person. So defining as an organization, what does that look like? Where is that? What are those moments? uh,
Mm.
can really help keep it clear as to what that vision for the bot is.
Definitely. It's interesting. There's lots of ways in which you could define complexity, isn't there, in terms of like a
Mm-hmm.
conversational assistant? You've got the complexity of the dialogue. Is it kind of like, is there a lot of information that we need to get hold of? You got the
Yeah.
complexity of the integrations in terms of what systems you might need to integrate with. You've got multiple different systems and multiple various kind of API calls you need to do, or whatever. You've got kind of the complexity of decision making, which is, as you just mentioned there, certain outcomes are entirely different depending on small nuances of someone's situation.
Right.
Is there any other things that I suppose add to the complexity when you're assessing a use case?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I could throw one in there for you. One of the complexities is also, scaling not just from the bot perspective, but from a language perspective. How do we
Mm,
go out to different countries, different styles of speaking, different tolerances for a automated conversation? And that's one big one. The other big one is how do we take this experience and tie it nicely and gracefully together with, WhatsApp, SMS, and the whole customer experience. So that's where I feel like a lot of companies are starting to put their attention. They've built chatbots or voice bots, and they're at this point where it's like, okay, we have something. Maybe there's room for improvement there, but how do we take this in other places, and what are the other use cases? So now we're taking something that, is in some cases complex, and adding layers around it that really makes it super, super, uh, just really thoughtful thinking has to be in place to
mm,
achieve that successfully.
yeah, it's a good observation that the it seems as though I remember in kind of like must have might been like 2018 or so when the Alexa sort of was at the peak of its hype, and where you're looking at what businesses could do with conversational
Hmm.
AI. And I think COVID kind of propelled a lot of things, and now I think that there's some
Hmm.
organisations that over the last 4 years have matured pretty well. Obviously, there's still others that are still getting started, but the vision back then was like that's what this should be. You should have that kind of brain that understands the business, understands your processes, understands the information in your content, understands your customers, and that brain should be able to engage and have conversations with people about whatever it is that they need to get done on any channel, that they need to get it done with. And it's kind of, I think people are starting to get to that now, which is that we've got a chatbot, it's working well. Okay, now what do we do? How can we extend it? How
Yeah.
can we scale it? Um, and the other thing I think we haven't seen any of it yet, but it's an area of our focus for 2023 is that I think a lot of companies approach chatbots or voice assistants from a position of trying to, I alluded to it earlier, prevent people from contacting the contact center or prevent people from getting to a
Hmm.
human. It sounds really crude, but it's like if we can just answer these questions or do these certain things, then people won't
Hmm.
need to call us. And so what they end up doing is they end up kind of sticking a plaster on an injury was that was kind of instigated from another part of the business, if that makes sense.
Right.
One part of the
Right.
business over here has some degree of failure, and the chatbot, picks up the slack for it. Where's my
Right.
parcel? This parcel arrived and it was broken. I want to exchange it. What's going on with my hosting? Why have you overcharged me? The issue has come from somewhere else, but the
Right.
contact is being absorbed by the chatbot. And so, what I'm kind of interested in exploring, and you've kind of
Hmm.
alluded to it just there, is how can you use conversational AI by giving a full end-to-end holistic view of a service, so that
Right.
it's not a thing that absorbs contact and prevents people from getting in touch with your live agents. It's something that is embedded throughout the customer journey from beginning to end, and it's always there when the customer needs it, and also it's there to be proactive, so that rather than someone
Hmm.
having to call to talk to a chatbot to say why is my parcel late, instead they get a text message saying sorry, your parcel's going to be late, and if you've got any questions you can respond to this text message. So you're kind of using conversational AI to craft a whole entire service. And I think that's hopefully what we'll sort of start to see. And I think you kind of alluded to that by on about putting this conversational AI into other channels and other places. Is that what the GoDaddy assistant is now? Is it purely a chatbot? Is it in WhatsApp? Like where does it exist today?
Yeah, so right now customers can find it on our website. So if they, in Canada, India, and the United States, if you just go to GoDaddy.com, several of the web pages will have a contact us chiplet and the chatbot will pop up. We will be scaling to more countries this year, looking at how we can integrate with, SMS and WhatsApp. Those are all things that we're looking into this year. And I think you hit on some really good points over there. So at GoDaddy, the way that we think about it isn't to, cut costs of care. We're not trying to reduce manpower. And that really changes our game because now we're thinking of it as a different kind of service where we're using automation for the areas that are kind of lower complexity, maybe low business value, and really allowing the people, the humans, to do what they're really good at, which is, getting more trained and specialized in the complex areas and taking that talent pool to grow their skills there. So um, again, it kind of goes back to that balance of where and what, do we use who?
Mm.
um, and having that balance. The other thing that I
I think we've lost you again there, Sonia. I think you might be on your way out. This is what happened last time. Are you still with us? You're still with us, but we're getting no audio. We lost the audio. And there we go. I predicted that one that time. I thought we would lose Sonia, but she'll be with us back in a moment. I do think there's something to that, as I was explaining there. This concept of viewing things from end to end holistically, from a whole service design perspective. We'll get more into that. Hello. I suspected
hello.
something might happen there. I know the trick now. I know the
I
trigger is
know
when the
now
audio
you know.
disappears.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you can connect to the Wi-Fi people, maybe the wizards can help us. Um, yeah, but I think I wanted to share about how you made that point about using using the chatbot for I'm now losing your point.
No.
Lost
So,
connection.
so yeah. So you were talking about how at GoDaddy the point is not to replace humans. The point is really to try and figure out how can the AI be used to take up
Yeah.
that kind of low complexity, repetitive tasks so that humans can be used more
Yes.
effectively. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
is the
Yes.
general gist.
Yeah. Thank you for triggering that. So, what I wanted to mention is sort of that interesting point of what really it comes down to what the business case is. So when we start thinking about the chatbot is intended essentially for the users, the customers who are going to be there. Um, but it also, because of that, has a huge amount of data and intel that comes in. So we're getting information about, how our integration with Microsoft Office works. What are the pain points there? And to your point, sometimes it's really the catch-all for problems that exist elsewhere. Um, so I will be making it my mission and responsibility to make sure that we're communicating our findings back so that the actual root of the problem can be solved. I think that's super important and
Mm.
helping the business and using those really critical learnings in a positive way. So that's something that I think we'll see organizations doing more of is actually starting to see where are the points that we can kind of actually help other areas of the business. At least
Yeah,
I hope that's what people do.
I think so. And there's a lot of teams who I know that part of the value of having conversational AI in place is to do exactly that. It's to gather the
Mhm.
kind of data that you can't get in other places, verbatim customer queries, issues, problems being spoken in their language, at scale is the data that's in contact centers, in call centers, is lost in bundles of audio recordings stored in the cloud that no one can get
Yeah.
through. Instead, you got to just pick two per week or per day to just eyeball. And so there's so much data there. The really great example is Comwave, Canadian telco. Their assistant Penny, when it launched, was only handling end to end about 5% of calls, 85, or it might be an 85% of calls. It was handed over to
Hmm.
an agent, and so from a pure objective kind of numbers point of view, it wasn't really a great bot in a sense because it was just handing stuff over to live agents. But what it did do, the it was obviously it was cutting down average handling time because it was gathering a bunch of information first. So it obviously was effective. But one of the main things that it did was through recognizing and understanding the issues that customers have and being able to
Hmm.
feed that back to the business, they were able to reduce the reasons for people calling by 30%. So they actually lowered calls by 30% by fixing the
Wow,
root cause of the problem based on the data that it was able to get from the conversational assistant, which is amazing.
that's a great use case. That's amazing.
Mm, yeah,
All power
it's
to them. Yeah.
yeah. So there we go. Um, so yeah, so you mentioned there, plans for next year. Kind of like expanding the scope, expanding the coverage of the assistant, expanding it into new channels and stuff like that. Um, any kind of learnings over the last kind of year or so that you think will set you up well to be able to do that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one we went over, which is have a clear vision and use case and communicate that to everybody, make it super clear what the purpose is, what we're trying to do, and why, based off of both the customer and business problems that the use case intends to solve. The second thing is keep up with the industry. This technology is ever changing. Companies are changing with it, and I think it's really important for those who are in this space to keep learning. We're all learning over time. This is pretty new. So keeping that curiosity, I think, is really important for driving success and really being open to what's happening, what's the data saying, what the receiving that and improving upon it. I think is really really important. And I would say the third area is let's see, so many. I can think of several, but I'm going to just focus on three for this. I would say the third area is education and getting people involved. What I found in every place I've been in so far and every project I've worked on is there's an excitement around chatbots, around voice, around IVR. It is cool. So, with that comes this opportunity really to share and educate people on what this is about, so that it helps keep the focus aligned of what's possible and what's not. um, it's a kind of a unique part of the job description
Mm,
that might not be there for known types of technologies. So I would say, be ready to put on that hat and wear it
yeah.
well, you know.
With great coolness comes great opportunity.
Yeah, that looks like our motto for today.
There you
With
go.
great blank comes great blank.
Yeah, there you are. That's cool. So what are some of the other things that have sort of in the last year, given that this is the last episode of the year, looking back over 2022, what are some of the things that have kind of really stood out to you as sort of milestones in the conversational AI kind of space?
Oh, great question. Training. I think that bots are getting better trained. I think people are starting to figure out sort of the algorithm and the science of what works well when it comes to training data. I do think there's, obviously a lot more room for improvement, but it's starting to shape up in a way that's much more formalized than I've seen prior to this year. So that's exciting. Um, the other area that I'd say we're making strides in is, the global expansion, translation. One of the things while we were at the Rework Summit, a huge part of the day was devoted kind of by accident, really, just because that's where people's minds were on localization. How do we get this out to different markets in the world? So that I think is really the next level of maturity being displayed. So that's been really really cool. And the third one, which is one that is, something that I think about and we're really at the forefront of, and I hope that it blossoms over time, is starting to now think about, okay, we have use cases, we have visions, how and what and where is it, responsibly and ethically used? Are we thinking about that piece? So that's something that I think we might have just broken into, and we'll maybe get into more years from now.
Yeah, I think that last point is something that we are really just scratching the surface of. So that rework
Yep.
summit that we were at, like you brought up some really good questions in your talk about like the ethical considerations and whether people are kind of considering it or not. And like one of the takeaways that so we ended up for those that don't know, like at that summit, the last two speakers I think pulled out something like that, and so I got asked to do a panel in the last hour, and it was like just on the spot, like we've got half an hour to plan this panel sort of thing, like what do you want to talk about? And we thought, well, let's just talk about ethics because everyone seems to have questions about ethics, and you were asking some people that were in the audience some really good questions, and no one seemed to have any answers. And so
Mm-hmm.
we spent a whole hour talking about ethics and the ethical considerations of conversational AI. And what was really interesting is that there wasn't any answers at the end of that whole hour, but there was lots of really, really good questions. So it
Yeah.
seems as though we're really at the beginning because we kind of know the questions to ask, which I think is one of the most important things, but we haven't found
Yeah.
the answers yet.
Absolutely. It was fascinating to watch because, I went into it having my questions to ask the audience, but not really knowing what was going to come back, because it was really the first time that in any event I'd been to where we kind of had that dialogue. And it was so surprising. It was one, that it wasn't something people really thought about, but then two, really the diversity of opinions. Um, and that to me was fascinating because it almost seemed like, for example, when we talked about, what, where would you like conversational AI to go? You know, nobody was in the middle. It was like, we really wanted to be sort of like how we are today, in that it's particular use cases, a little more distant part of our lives, to, we want full on, fully capable, human like robots. So that kind of blew my mind and just demonstrated the importance of being able to, those questions that have been formed from that, just what are the answers, and hopefully we find some common ground.
It is really interesting. And then you look at like the large language models like Chat GPT and things like that.
Hmm.
And it's like as fantastic as they are, there's other ethical considerations in there as well around things like intellectual property. Like it's getting data from stuff that other people have created. It's been trained on that stuff without
Hmm.
anyone really giving it permission to do that, especially on the image generation ones. It's been
Right.
fed data based on people's creative output, artists' creative output, and then it's just generating things that are very similar. In some cases, I don't know if you've seen it, but in some cases, some of the images actually have signatures, messy signatures in the bottom corner, which kind of shows that they must have been trained on images with signatures in the corner, therefore people's creative output. Yet there's no attribution in the with a lot of the Chat GPT stuff. There's no source kind of reference. Like here's the 9 different places I got this information from, and so well we've lost Sonia again. But essentially, what I'm kind of getting at is that there's a lot of questions to be answered because these large language models and other AI technologies are going to be able to do a lot more powerful stuff for us. Um, Here we go. We've got Sonia back again. Are you with us? Uh,
Yeah.
I was just explaining there. Yeah. So like one question is where are these things getting data from? Is it kind of ethically sourced and fairly attributed? There's all these questions about privacy. There's all the questions about power and authority. There's questions about biases, racial biases, and all kinds of other biases in training data. And so it's such an interesting area that
Yeah.
is, yeah, definitely worth exploring. Well, has to be explored in 2023.
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. What do you think then? 2023. what do you think are some of the, obviously we've heard a little bit about what your kind of aims are with GoDaddy. What do you think, or what are you expecting we'll see in 2023 from a kind of conversational AI industry standpoint, whether it's from a technology adoption, like some of the trends that you might kind of think that you think we'll see?
Yeah, I think we're going to see wow experiences where it really isn't just about isolated technologies, but how do we really come together in that whole journey, whether it's for the business or for the customer. Um, we're going to see greater integration of these conversational AI tools and platforms in ways that will be much better for the user. They will be much more delightful, much easier, um, more graceful, uh, and I'm looking forward to that because that's going to start feeling like we've really started arriving. Um, that to me is my definition of when it really makes sense holistically and we're really doing something amazing with it. So that's what I think we'll get towards next year. And really, part of that is being really tailored and personalized, using metadata in a way that makes sense. Um, you know, meeting the user where they are, being considerate of that, and acting accordingly. So that's going to
Mm.
be. I think we'll be more wowed by chatbots than we have been in the past.
I hope so. I definitely hope so. Um, what about, you mentioned earlier the Reworks conference, and also you've alluded yourself to GoDaddy kind of scaling across geographies and across locales and languages. What are some of your kind of considerations as you begin to do that? You've obviously got, there's you mentioned India, I think UK and US you're at currently. What are some of
Mm-hmm.
the sort of considerations that, for those that haven't done as much as that in terms of gone to any other international geography, and then also
Yeah.
thinking about how you're scaling that? Like, what are some of your key sort of considerations for doing
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, and I'll kind of speak broadly because I think there's some things that just overall are things to consider. One is resources. So oftentimes we find ourselves in a situation where, trying to get the job done with the same size of a team or a number of people helping out. Um, so that game of efficiency really becomes important. And also creativity arises from that because now it's like, okay, how do we do this in a way that we can manage different sets of training data possibly, and that we can continue forward without breaking. So that's a real key consideration I have as well, is just making sure we're doing things in a way that makes sense. And my feeling towards that is to really, really start small and know what the plan of attack is. So, trying to be like, Pinky and the Brain, we're going to take over the world in 1 year might not be the the smoothest move, but kind of curating, in these particular areas, these are the types of inquiries that come to us, or these are the use cases that really make sense. Pinpoint those high impact areas and do those really well. That I think is going to be really important for being able to expand well. And then the third one is, kind of watch data and see where the impact really is. There's no value in spending time on things that need are on the developmental list or the desire to build list, but don't add value to anybody. So letting that really guide.
Mm. It's interesting when you think about kind of scaling into different locales. I remember, must have been about 2018, we did a couple of podcasts on kind of internationalization and translating conversational experiences into different languages and stuff like that. And one of the interesting parts was around kind of persona design and how, for example, in the UK, if
Mm-hmm.
you were to build your persona on like a postman or postwoman, someone
Mm-hmm.
who delivers the mail, then in the UK, although they're friendly, it's not, you wouldn't necessarily get into a long, deep conversation with the postman. You wouldn't like,
Yeah.
you don't know their names and stuff like that. Whereas in France, you do. and they're very
Hmm.
much like neighbors, and you'll stop for 10 minutes and talk and stuff. So I think it was Micah Coppins that mentioned like when you create a persona for different geographies, cultural things are different.
Yeah.
You may have similar use cases, I would imagine, for GoDaddy, for example. GoDaddy does a set
Hmm.
number of stuff. Maybe some geographies don't have quite the breadth that other geographies have, but broadly speaking, they probably do the same sort of stuff. And so you might be able to get away with some of the conversational patterns being similar. But is there any things in particular that are distinctly different about
That's a
GoDaddy
great
in
question.
one country versus another?
That's a great question, and I'll be curious about that because we haven't, I think we'll have to do it first before we'll find out. So I'm going to be really curious about that. I kind of have looked into just from an industry perspective, what are the different like regional um, like behaviors. And from that, I found that oftentimes in Asia, people are more in the interest of one using other channels. So they would much prefer to get on, WhatsApp to handle
Mm.
their issue than anywhere else. So that makes a difference. And then two, much more likely to just type like human person, just wanting to get to that. It typically the European and you know North American countries are a little bit more used to the chatbot system. Like, people know about it, people know how it works, it's what they're expecting. And there's a huge percentage of people that actually want to not, they just want to get it done there. They don't want to
Mm.
talk to a person, they don't want to connect, they want to just resolve their issue and do it as quickly as possible. So I'm going to be really curious about how the cultural differences pan out, and it'll be very interesting to see if and how the behaviors might be different.
Yeah. And to get to the point where you are scaling it to different countries, the business must be really behind it. They must understand what the value is because they surely want to replicate that value elsewhere. So, how does GoDaddy determine whether this is a success, and how do you have those conversations with stakeholders around like how are we measuring the success of this kind of thing? You mentioned having a strong vision. How do you
Yeah,
turn that into what
yeah,
actually is happening?
yeah. I think it's important to have the overall business strategy involved. Like, we want to go out to different markets, because if that's not there, then all of a sudden the conversation with stakeholders changes. But if that support is there from an overall company standpoint, then the story is more about, okay, how and why and where do we do this, rather than should we do this. So I think that's the first part, is having that support. And then the second part about that is, so like, I'll give the example for GoDaddy. Like, right now, if you were to go to some of the GoDaddy uh, websites in other countries, like, trying to think off the top of my head, like some of our smaller English speaking countries, for example, we actually give the phone number on the home page, or you can find it very easily on Google. And, like, as you know, that's not really the model that most companies are going towards. And so for us, it's very simple how we measure success. If we add the chatbot, are we reducing phone calls?
Mm.
The answer will be yes, because we're there. The net is only positive as possible. Uh, so if that's how initially, that's what it'll be. It'll just simply be the difference in uh, in containing the right kind of inquiries,
Mm.
so that, again, that, the people can stay spending time on things that people should be spending time on.
Mm.
I think what we'll see in 2024, if we want to go a little beyond, is, okay, so, we did that. Now, how do we go? Where do we go from there? What do we fine tune? What are the areas of improvement? I think the metrics for that will change over time.
Mm. It's interesting. The GoDaddy is, I suppose, similar to a lot of other companies that have a lot of kind of demand, which is that obviously you need to be a service the amount of people that call, But some companies, I won't name any names, but I've moved house recently, and I will name names anyway. Virgin Media don't have a particularly fantastic. When you do get through to someone, the customer service isn't always particularly fantastic.
Mm,
I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's lack of training, or whatever it is. But every time I've had an issue with GoDaddy, so I use GoDaddy for our website. I've always used GoDaddy actually for
mhm,
probably more than 10 years. Um, and every time I've needed to have an issue resolved, I've always called, and it's always been a really good service. So
mhm.
the my I haven't used the chatbot, but my expectation of GoDaddy is that it's got really good service. I can't remember really waiting on hold that often. The people who I speak to are generally pretty good. Um, so how do you take the essence of that, which is really good customer service, easy enough to get through to someone, get your issue resolved 9 times out of 10, really polite. So that's the essence. How do you take that and then instill that same vibe into the conversational experiences without, because some people might just perceive chatbots as just getting in the way and they don't work. I've had a bad experience with other chatbots, so I'm not going to use this one. How do you sort of take that, yeah, the essence of that experience and get it into the chatbot? Sorry, but I think we're going to lose you again because we've lost the audio. Usually, when we lose your audio, the video disappears and there it's gone. On that cliffhanger, that was a good question. That I'm looking forward to the answer. Because GoDaddy does generally have pretty good service. I've used that a number of different times with various issues, and I've always had my stuff resolved. Here's Sonia. I was just saying there that I was just couldn't wait for that answer because yeah, you're shaping up to give a good answer there, so no pressure.
That fun. But so it is a tall order for us to be able to emulate, what is a great customer experience. Like our customer support's award winning. So then try to recreating that in the chatbot is a challenge, and that's part of what I like is that challenge of how do we do it. So I think there's a couple things there. One is making sure we have a consistent voice, tone, personality that mirrors the vibe of what a person would experience when they call or chat somewhere else with a person at GoDaddy. The other thing is really like we're not like if we're not trying to block the user from getting to a person. So if they would like that, in fact, sometimes we'll present like, okay, do you want to call or do you want to chat with the human being? Um, so we're not really trying to block them for that. We're really trying to be there for the cases where it makes sense for self-service. I think that kind of surprises people and that makes them feel like it's a little bit of a better experience than some other chatbots that just kind of loop and never, really are just trying to not get you to a person. That's not our goal. Um, so that really helps kind of build that trust with the user. And then I'd say the third thing is if you typically call GoDaddy, you can get your issue resolved, and it seems to be that the person knows and can help you. Um, so trying to emulate that where we're really able to be sort of their guide and their buddy, and we have a ton of different issues we can help them resolve, so that they can again feel like, oh, this is something that can help me. So those are three ways that we try to do that, and obviously it's a work in progress because it's uh, it's hard to be as good as a person. um, Especially when you're customer support, it tends to be doing an outstanding job. It's a tall order for a chatbot to do that.
Yeah,
So
good.
those are yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a good approach though, and it's like, well, it's like you've been alluding to. It's using the conversational AI for what it's good at, and using people for what they're good at, and then together
Mhm.
you end up with the best of both worlds. That's kind of the whole point, really. I think I've got a bit of a chip on
Yeah.
my shoulder and a bit of a gripe from some things I've seen recently from other kind of companies where I'm thinking, there was a House of Fraser one I was testing the other day, and it's just the worst thing I've ever seen. It's quite clearly there to basically keep you in that chatbot and not get your issue
Yeah.
resolved, to the point where it is maddening. It is absolutely maddening. And so it's so strange how I don't understand how companies can do this, because it gives everyone a bad kind of rep. But I think
Mhm.
from hearing everything that you've been saying, I think it seems as though you're kind of using it properly, using it for the best of both worlds. As I said, use the conversational AI for the use cases that make sense, where you can add value, where it's going to be easier for people, and use the people for that long tail, really complex stuff where it'll probably be a while before chatbots and stuff will really be able to solve that stuff anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that.
Nice. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really have appreciated the chat. It's been absolutely amazing. And yeah, hopefully we can do it again when you've got it up and running in a few more channels in a few more countries, and we'll see what the learnings are there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure and it's so much fun to talk to you about all this stuff. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Nice one. Likewise, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Yes. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy all holidays to everybody watching. It is going to be a great 2023. I can feel it.
Indeed, indeed. On that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for joining me. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah, and we'll see you in 2023. See you soon.